Mark here. Hello. So last time we finished the model-based system where ChatGPT actually saves the cost categories into a model, the business expense model, and those business expense records we imported from outside, external to the workbook. So you learned import scripts, among other things. But those are very important because I think the first and most important step you can take is importing some data from your own domain or whatever it is that you work with every day and build models for them and connect those models together. And that's how you spark your imagination. If you just do that step and play around with it, it will lead to a cascade of events. And before you know it, you will have more ideas about things to do than ability to do them, which is not a bad place to be. In this video, we're not going to do anything with hitting ChatGPT or any AI endpoints. We're going to do two things. First, I'm going to clarify a few areas that I think might have been confusing in earlier videos, and fill some promises I said for things I would show you in Prompt Explorer, our user form. And then we're just going to go deep into unit testing and validation, which is like mostly unit testing, which you could think of as like quality control. Okay. So the first thing is that we made this AI agent tools, and we put this paste answers adjacent right. This is the one that the selection based one uses. So this guy. Right now, this message right here with these categories, 1, travel expense, 2, office renovations, it's going to use that function, the callback function, to paste. This one we put here, but the model-based one, the callback for the model, this classify business expense from JSON, we left here on this module, and it's private. And the reason is this could not be, it is an agent tool, and it is a callback, but we would never have a use for it outside of classifying our business expense, the model records. So it lives here because there's not a chance anything else will call it. All right, other small cleanup thing, this prompt worksheet, let's nuke it. We don't need it. We can check and see, make sure there's no ranges. Okay. Yeah, let's nuke it. Good time to save. Or actually, this would be a good time to do a F12 to save as and increment a version number. In case I was wrong, in case for some reason we did need that prompt worksheet. So I kind of do a mixture of just regular Control S save versus F12. But anytime you're removing or deleting something, that's a good time to use the F12 save. The save sandwich, I call it. Right before you delete, hit save on the current version that you're in. Before you delete whatever it is, the code, the worksheet, the name range, hit save. Then delete it, then immediately hit F12 and save as. So you create a checkpoint right before the delete, and protect that checkpoint by moving on F12 and going up one version. Okay, gone. Prompt Explorer tuning. So in Prompt Explorer form, which is this guy here, the first tiny little thing is this thing says open notepad. What it does is, it opens the prompt just opens up a notepad. I don't know, in case we had a really big prompt. It was handy to me when I was developing it. It should say open in notepad, I think. I just think it's not clear. And while this is a small thing, I think that the thought of just like thinking through how will an end user read this and will it make sense? And is there any small thing that I can do to kind of make it a little bit more clear? Every time I look at a form, I try to just refine and calibrate just a little bit. All right, user form activate. So we have a to-do item in here, right here. Raise an error if GV prompt is nothing. So why do we want to do that? The answer is we want people to open this form anywhere. Maybe you open it from, well, we open it from the double click. So you can open it from right here, or you can open it from in here. So there's two entry points, and maybe there would be another entry point in the future. But regardless of what entry point where the entry point is, we don't want them to do this. So I'm going to make just a button here. Properties, break prompt explorer. And all I'm going to do in this is say form prompt explorer.show. So recall in our real form opener, we take a prompt name. If they don't provide it, we force one. And then we call this prompt explorer.real initialize. Okay. And when we do that, we're using the prompt name to set the active prompt. So this entire form, there's an implicit assumption that this GV active prompt, that something is there. All right. Right when we try to refresh display elements, GV active prompt.baseText. If GV active prompt is nothing, this is going to break. I mean, there's 1,000 places on this form. So here, watch. I'm just going to hit save. Object variable or with block variable not set. Debug. It's right here. So GV active prompt, if I wanted to see, what type it is, a lot of times I do this, nothing. We would want to see that it was one of these, class prompt. But the way to really do it is to go to this locals window. Uh-oh. Toddler's here. Hold on a second. Okay, so the locals window, when you see this yellow error text, it's going to freeze control of the program. So the value of every variable, everything is suspended. If I click me, the user form, it's going to give us, oh goodness gracious, get out of there. It'll give us the value of everything within the scope of the user form, including this active prompt. It's nothing because the worksheet button is bypassing our form opener. So let's stop this. The form opener is here. This is the way that we want people to open the form. So we're going to use the activate event right here. And we're just going to say if GV active prompt is nothing, then error prompt explorer was opened. Please use the app forms function to open prompt explorer. Maybe the function name changes on app forms. I don't know, but this seems to hedge that a little bit. Do message equals VB exclamation. Dot caption. So the message text that we want to display, the VB exclamation to get a yellow warning one, and me dot caption. And let's say here, unloading form. And we're just going to get out. So bypass if let's test it. I'm going to hit F5, and I'll go through here. F5 would probably work too. The one time I don't put stupid message variable there. I've been putting it here like on all the modules, and I feel like I've only used it maybe once, if that. All right, I'll try it with F5. Error, please use the app forms function. Cool. So now we've sort of made it harder to, we can't prevent them from doing it, from calling that show method directly and not using the app forms. But we can make it really clear when they do that what they did wrong, and we can prevent the program from lurching on. Good. Same result from here. When you delete a command button, if I just delete this button, it would not clear this code out from here. So like if I delete this, see how it's still sitting there? So when you forget to do that, it just becomes dead code. Maybe even, well, no. All right, good time to save. What's next? Control alignment. So you can align, see how these are, like this is a little jagged here. So hold the control key and then click as many controls as you want. And I'm going to go to Format, Align, Lefts. So I'm going to align all of them to have the same left-hand margin. And then don't let your OCD take over, Mark. And then here, with them still selected, I'm going to get properties. Because these are the ones that are selected, they're all going to have the same. What I type in here, I'm going to type in 175 for width to make them all the same width. But it wouldn't affect one that wasn't selected. Another thing that could be useful is these distribute. So if you have 3 buttons that are unevenly distributed, vertically or horizontally, I just usually use make equal. I've never used these. A little bit curious about them though. It just makes them equal. So there's probably a lot of other stuff, but those are the main things that I use. All right. Right now, we have an issue where when you're in Prompt Explorer, you can't change to a different prompt, right? You can't cycle through the prompts. You're on this one. I mean, if you come from here, you literally, there is no other one you can get to. But if you come from here, you can choose whichever one you want. But in any case, you got to go back to switch. So we want to just add a simple toggle here so you could cycle through the prompts. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to shrink him. Granted, this isn't going to be super pretty, but it'll work. You could make yours pretty. I'm going to make a label that has a little arrow. We'll make that label, I don't know, how about this dark red? All right, I'm going to give this label a name. Most labels I don't, but this one's going to do something when you click on it, so it does deserve a name. Label, go to next prompt. All right. I double clicked on that label. This is it automatically gives me the click event. So this does qualify as a special event. I'm going to make a function called go to next prompt. Subroutine. In Python, everything is a function. There is no concept of subroutine or a procedure. It's either a function and it returns something or it doesn't. All right, so we need to get the database for prompt, and then we need to get the next record ID. Get db.getNextID or blank. So if you're on the very last record in the table, it'll give you blank. That's its signal to you that there's no more. If next record ID equals blank, go down a little bit here. So if the next record ID is blank, we just need to go back to the beginning. So we're going to set gv active prompt equal to db.getFirstRecord or nothing. It's true this will break if there's 0 prompts in the database at all. But if that's the case, something larger is probably afoot. Otherwise, just db.getRecord by ID, next record ID. All right. Either way, we're going to set gv_active_prompt to something. Not equal to nothing. There. Now, if it's not the case, we'll get a feedback. But again, this would only happen if there was no records in the database. And we're not clearing those records like we are the other ones. All right, so this is going to be, put it under this main scripts. I didn't put it inside the label code. I just don't like to put too much stuff inside the code for the label click event. So I'll make us a subroutine on the side, and then I'll call that subroutine, unless it's just very trivial like this. All right, let's test it out. Oops. Whew. It's kind of bothering me down there. Malformed record ID. Jeez Louise, guys. Sorry. So I just made a string variable and I pass an empty string. It wants you to give it any ID and it will tell you what is the next ID in the table. But I just passed it blank, so. But the error message let me know that right away. I was able to figure it out from the error message. God. I bet you I forgot to call it. I'm gonna have to no. You guys see what I forgot to do. Call refresh display elements. So I'm updating active prompt, but then I didn't do anything else. So I have to call refresh display elements, and then that's gonna repopulate all of the text boxes with the correct value. Fifth time is the charm. Yeah. Something else I might consider for this form is that we probably shouldn't let them change the name field. I don't want to do that right now. But since we're using the name column as the index, and we've hard-coded in appcommon, app constants, these prompt names here, allowing the user to change that in the form might not be a good idea. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to show you is how to open the list view outside of this model. So I just hit Control-Shift-M, and then I can open the list view for either prompt or business expense by double-clicking on it. That's one way to get in there. Another way, models. Most likely, though, you would like to be able to open up a list view from your home page. Since it's such a common thing that you need to do, you don't want that extra step. So let's make this button called Open Expense List View. We'll just do one of them. Back color, yellow. Open form generic list. This workbook, model name, business expense. All right. So now we have a quick button that we could just quickly open it up. Another thing to go with that is that there's this parameter back here, custom records, and if we pass that, we can pass any subset of records that we want to display instead of just showing all of them, which is what this will do by default. So let's say collection. It's app common dot get business expenses unclassified. All right. So here I have to use, because I don't want to pass an open form. I'm not inside of a form. You do that, it closes the open form for you if you're coming into that view, the list view from another form. But we're not coming from another form. We're just coming from the worksheet. So I want to hop over and not pass that parameter. To do that, I have to give the name. I have to pass the name of the parameter. So that's like this: custom records colon equals, and then this. If I tried to do it without passing the keyword here, it would think I was talking about open form, and there would be some sort of type error. Like collection is not a form. Let's see if that works. Cool. Now we're looking at a cut of just the unclassified ones. I mean, another way that I could have done that, I mean, I'm not going to rebuild the form, but is that I could have typed in status unclassified right here. I would have achieved the same result. But now, if you want to use the filter, you can filter on something more, you know, without using up, because you can't specify multiple keyword arguments. You only get one. So by starting from everything unclassified, we haven't used up the card in our back pocket, the filter card. All right. Okay, in the last video, we already, or maybe the video before, we already made a validation for business expense. So we did a progression. And ultimately, we landed on this, where we're on a module called validate business expense. So because the module starts with validate, it's going to run automatically whenever we press this button. And we can also just hit F5. This is really just for convenience, hitting F5 on this module. And we can get the validation issues. So these are two that we intentionally coded. They're still sitting in there. Or these are two records that we intentionally made invalid by setting a follow-up question on a value on a record without having that record also being categorized as needs review, and the other one is just the flip of that. So we want to take this pattern and we want to apply it to the prompt modules. Let's just do it one more time for reinforcement. Validate AI. I'm just gonna say validate AI modules for now. All right, so I copied over this from class business expense. I just copied it exactly over, and I'm just gonna update this business expense thing to be the correct module name, and I'll make this. Gotta be careful that this name of this is not the same as this, which it is. So just say sure. So this is no longer going to be validating business expense. It's going to be validating prompt records. I'm updating all the references to business expense to be prompt. Good time to save. All right. Isn't it funny that, okay, it does get it, good. I thought I had click compile and it didn't get it. let's take this and let's bring it to this. All of this is going to go away, actually. Let's run it. Cool. We didn't add any assertions, so we expected it to be 0. All right, so let's see. What did I want to check here? Two things. Base text. Name. This, and then the other thing that I want to check is that prompt.VBA callback name must correspond to a defined procedure. eb.assert. Now I could say assert true, VBA procedure exists, this workbook, the name of the module, the name of the procedure. I could do that. But aside from being brittle, so brittle means that if I changed the callback function, if I moved it to a different module, so say it was this paste answers adjacent right, if I just moved this to a different module, or that would break it if I did it this way. So the way we do it instead is assert. Also, if I did it that way, it would resolve to false. So VBA procedure exists. It would resolve to false, and that's not clear. So I would read the failure message and it would just say like false is not true, and it would tell me, I guess, this information here. But it just is more. It's more work. So if you choose the right assertion method, you'll sort of like inherently get automatically a better, higher quality failure message when the test fails. Assert VBA procedure exists. This workbook, the procedure name. Now I don't even have to. Maybe I will. Oh yeah, I'm gonna use this guy. But I don't have to like put in the name of the. I don't have to do this. Something like, you know, in order to help with the failure message. The failure message will automatically include that. But we're not gonna check it if the VBA callback name is blank. So maybe when we just set up a prompt, we haven't set a callback yet. Maybe it genuinely doesn't have a callback. Can't really think if that would be the case or not. And then here, so I'm going to make a function here called I can't remember. I don't think we actually coded this one yet. Yeah, we didn't. That's not true. All right, so this is going to look inside the string that we give it. I'm calling an add-in function. You kind of tell because anything that starts with string or collection probably is an add-in function. We're gonna tell the opening character and the close character, and this is gonna return every grouping inside of the base text that falls within those characters. So that should be our replacement text. No, we're not going to test it out in there right now. And right here, I'm just going to say other languages usually have like an assert greater or an assert less than for the same reason that using this VBA procedure exists is better than saying assert true. It'd be nice to have a greater than one. We have an equal, so if two things aren't equal, if you assert equal A and B and they're not equal, the failure message will show you A and B. But this is not going to, I'm not going to get very good information, except I will because of this. Okay, let's try it out. Good time to save. We'll run it from here. 4 asserts, everything passes. Let's try to break it. Let's see. I have an idea. Instead of doing the full render dynamic results summary or whatever, that opens up the terminal. If there's any error, it will open up the terminal. We don't really need that for this thing, so we're just going to use this message error box list. Render even if no errors. Sometimes you only want to do anything, like show anything, throw a message box in the event that something's wrong. Otherwise, you want to just let the user keep going. A good example of that is if you try and create a new field, add a field to a model, and there's some issue with it, like there's already a field that has that name, or you choose a name that starts with like an @ symbol or illegal character. If there's a problem, it'll throw one of these little message box things up, and it'll show you the problem. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. But in this case, we do want to render no matter what, because the users click the validate button. We don't want a situation where whenever it's valid, just nothing happens at all. We have to give some signal. So in this case, render even if no errors. True. And this truncate logline prefix, I'm just going to let it go. It just makes it a little shorter to do that. It's already the default. I don't have to pass this keyword thing. I could just pass true. I'm passing it so that when I'm casually passing by here later, I don't have to click in my mouse here and see what true is. So, all right. I don't know, right here. All right, let's break the rule. So it's looking for just at least one replace tag should be found in a template. Otherwise, it's like, what are you doing with that template anyways? And if there was a situation where we needed to do that, then we could remove that validation rule. All right, we got it. No replace tags found in prompt-based text. I'm happy with that one. Okay, let's shift from unit testing to validation, and I'll show you what the difference therein is. So I'm going to insert a module, and this module, instead of starting with validate, this module is going to start with test business expense. Okay. Let's copy this validate module. And look at the things that I change here. So I'm copying a validation module, just a regular old validation module, to a very regular old test module. I'm going to change the name here to say test business expense. And instead of calling validate single module, I'm going to call test single module, which underneath the hood are very, very similar. And this, instead of being get validate errors, we're going to rename this to get test errors. And this is not even going to be here. Our first test function is going to be called this. Okay. So you could the distinction between testing and validation is by convention. The only technical distinction is that when you run this button, it's going to run every function in your workbook that is on a module that starts with test, and the function on that module is called get test errors. It will go through and discover all of those procedures, and then it will execute them, and it will take the results of each one, which will be an error bank, and it will fold them all into one single error bank, and then it will render that report for you. Validation does the exact same thing. So the difference in my mind and how I would suggest you use it is testing is for testing functions and things that would break in any workbook. So if you're imagining a situation where you have one main workbook that you maintain and keep on a T drive, and then every time you start a report, you go and you get a copy of that template, you inject the data, import the data that's relevant for your current report, and you do your report. You would expect that in all of any workbook, regardless of what data is in the workbook, the test would always fail or succeed. And validation is the opposite. So validation is very much about the current data, the state of the data that's in there. So in our situation now, we have it where, like, if a business expense record that happens to be imported into this workbook, so it's data that came in, and then the user has set a follow-up question on a record that is not tagged for review. That's a validation issue. And that would only occur necessarily in that workbook. It would not necessarily occur in your teammate's workbook. So the other distinction is that usually, at least my expectation, is that users will run validate. So an end user will be running validate. They might run test too, but we expect them to run validate. So validate, that means validate needs to be really fast, because an end user should not have to sit there and wait. And it also means that validate can't mutate the data of the workbook. So because you expect to be running validate in the course of a report, so validate's going to enforce business rules. A discount rate can't be negative. A spread can't be wider than this. After making adjustments to some set of sales comps, the range in sales comps price should be more narrow. If you're making adjustments, for land or condition or asbestos or something wrong with a sales comp and an appraisal, when you add up all the adjustments and you look at the adjusted sales price, the whole point is that the range should be more narrow. If it's getting wider, that's a problem. So that's the type of stuff that you can dig into and validate using validation. It's like, in the company that I used to work for, reports go through 5 levels of review. So, a junior analyst will write it, an analyst will review it, a manager will review it, a partner will review it. And at all levels of review, they're looking for these kinds of things. So having validation is just like a way to help catch things earlier in the process. In software, you want to catch bugs earlier. The longer you wait to catch a bug, the more expensive it is to fix it, with the latest possible point you could catch it being in production when an end user finds it. I think it's the same, you know, inside of businesses when you're in that like 5-level review system I just described. It's much cheaper and better to catch a mistake. You know, the junior analyst hits a validate button and they get the feedback of, dude, your adjusted sales price, the range, it widened. You have bad adjustments. Than it is to get all the way to the manager level, and the manager has to send the edits back to the analyst. They have to go back. You know, it just creates. I think you see where I'm going. So you want validation to be fast. You expect end users to run it, and validate should not mess up data. The last thing is that testing, you kind of can mess up data. So we're gonna go in a little bit, but in order to test that things work the way we want, we have to change the data and intentionally create problems, and then make sure that the program responds to those problems the way that we want it, the way that we want it to. The last thing that I want to say about that is that sometimes there's a gray area where a particular thing that you're looking at could go either way. It could go to validate or test, and that's just a judgment call. I wrote here to make a joke about how like validation and unit testing are like the park ranger and the city cops. You know, they're both sworn officers who can arrest you, and they have the same powers under the law. And then there's like a high school kegger party that's like, you know, at the edge of the city, like a little bit into the park. You know, sometimes there's a gray area in terms of whether it's validate or test jurisdiction. I'll give you some examples if I think any. Okay, so let's write this function first. Get TERS business expense status. Okay. So business expense status is this guy. And he's saying that if no category is concluded, then we're unclassified. If we're tagged as needs review, so this select case, me.cost category. If me.cost category is blank, we're unclassified. If it's equal to needs review, then we're status needs review. Otherwise, we're classified. It means we're non-blank and we're not this one. This value that we're returning, recall, this was the enum that we wrote right here. So the enum is like a nice, you know, it's great for the autocomplete in the IDE here. This whole thing is the VBA IDE. Because it removes the ambiguity about whether you're supposed to pass, like if you want, you know, to filter records by status or something, should you pass in classified, however it's spelled, or classified? Instead, you just pass this enum. And like they're built into the system. So we need to test that, and we can try to test this guy at the same time. Because in the list view, this is just a number, really. An enum is a number. So we saw that in the list view for the expenses, we didn't want to show like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever. We wanted a nice readable thing. Okay, so right now, let's just go ahead and we're going to mess up the records. So I said, you know, test should never mess up data. We're just going to mess it up just to get the hang of doing this. So we're going to need db get db. Just see, make sure that we. Cool. All right, so we have 101 records in there now. Let's get one. First record. Okay. I'm going to make a little helper function here. No, this guy. The reason is that when you run through here, you'll see towards the end of this, but there's a function in the work addin has called message box accept testing, and I use that in a lot of places when I want to check a function, but I don't want to throw the message box, because when the message box comes up, it freezes execution of the program. So I want to be able to run unit tests and then go get a drink in the kitchen. I do not want to have a box come up and then have the unit test get blocked. So, but when I'm developing the test for the first time, I need to see those in case I make a mistake. Okay, and you'll see an example of that in just a second. All right, so I usually check the valid case or just a normal case first, and then I would check error cases. But let's just see here. So let's just say check unclassified record. So for an unclassified record, we would expect cost category to be blank and follow-up question to be blank. Mind you, we're just taking an arbitrary record, the first one in the database, whatever it is, we're taking that one, but we're going to guarantee that we know what the status function's doing. It's just checking the cost category and making a decision off that. I don't think I even need to change follow-up question now that I think about it. Okay, and let's just call this T1. All right, let's run it, save. All right, field failed validation while saving, aborting save. Raw value blank is illegal for field, business expense. So that's a validated field here, cost category. Technically, we didn't say blank was allowed. So even though we're coming in from VBA over here, it's gonna stop us because it recognizes no, that's not allowed for that field. And because I want to test that behavior, that's why it has the message box accept testing. So we need to add blank as a valid choice. So recall that the categories, I hit Control-Shift-K to open this form. I'm not sure if I'm being too repetitive, but you could also get from here. Cost category, the field type is custom validated. So when you have something set as custom validated, whatever you put in the very top cell, whatever data validation you put there, that is what will be applied for that field. You know about the inspect ranges button already that shows you ranges. There's also a validation button, and this is really useful when you're looking at when you're like working on your formulas and validation in these tables. You're allowed to have formulas inside tables. Okay, so let's add blank. It's getting its validation from this range right here. So it's over on the expenses sheet, cost categories. So we just need to go over there, and we need to splice in a blank. So the range is right here right now. I'm going to take the bottom half of it. I'm going to move this whole thing down, just one spot down. And then I'm going to check. Cool, my range is intact. Because this could look like a mistake to someone, I might put a note here and say, this blank is intentional, blank is an allowed choice, and the default choice, and the default value for the field. Cool. Let's run this again. All right, everything's fine. Let's check the next one. How about a classified record? Remember I made that cost category supplies, and I said at some point you would see why I made it. This is why I made it. I just want to get a valid category. I don't want to assign it something random. Status classified. And the last one we need to check, our sort of weird one reserved for the bottom, is going to be if it's in that needs review. Everything passes. There is another method in there, the toString method. So record.status. There's also this status string. So we'll test this. We'll test this separately. We're not going to do that right now. All right, let's run the full thing. Right now it's the same as this because there's only one function here. So when I run, it should be called test. Not really an issue here. Can solve that one with a space. I'm just making sure that the name of this module that we're on right here, that it's not the same as the subroutine. I think it'll let you do it, but it's not good. All right. Cool. So now from out here, if I run this, it's also going to hit it. So we literally only have one test function in this entire workbook. So whether we run the whole workbook, all the modules, whether we run the one on just this module, or whether we run this specific one, it looks the same. Let's add some more so that they're not the same. All right. In order to speed us along a little bit, we'll cheat on this one. Maybe I'll alternate between cheating and not cheating. So I'm going to kick this guy down now that we're done with him. And when I actually was stubbing this out, what I automatically did when I ran into that issue with the blank, needing to add that as a field, is I wrote this one. So this is going to just check, specifically it's going to check and make sure that blank is in that choice range. But it'll check a little bit more too. So what do? We do the same regular setup. We get error bank, then we get the choice range. So this range name choice cost category, this maps ultimately back to this right here. So we're testing this. We're testing the contents of this range, and we're making sure that nobody's done like a cut, which can move a range, or any one of the things I'm sure you know that can go awry when using name ranges. So we're going to check and make sure that there's at least 15. So I think I looked and I saw, there's 15 choices. But I did the greater than, that way if it grows, it's going to be fine. But if it shrinks, if it gets lopped in half, then it's going to detect it. All right. We want to make sure that assert range contains. So that's one of those useful asserts that'll give you a nice failure message without you having to work too hard. You just pass it a range and you pass it the value that should be in that range. All right. In this case, usually I just do T1, T2, T3, T4, because when you're tracking down a failure message, you get the name of the test and you just go find which T number, and that lets you zero in right away. But when I want to remind myself, like, no, it's not an oversight, blank really should be there, I put it there. Maybe that isn't the best example of that. Okay, so let's run this and make sure it works. It does? Great. All right, so now we have a question of the perennial question of who will guard the guards. So we have in business expense, we have this validation rule that says a record should become invalid if cost categories needs review and there's not a follow-up question, or the opposite of that. But how do we know that this is working? Ultimately you reach a spot where it's like, can the test test the test? And the answer is no, they shouldn't. And that's why unit test code especially should be very simple, very blocky, very easy to understand. Because if you start writing clever tricks and abstractions in your unit tests, you can begin to doubt the test. So the tests are the ultimate backstop. It's like the quality control of last resort. Validation, for me at least, is a little bit forward of that. It could be a little more complex because you can test validation. Sometimes I do that, and sometimes I don't. But we're going to do it in this case because it shows some good testing maneuvers. So get test errors, business expense validation, VB hosters workbook, error bank. Cheat some of this stuff. Let's see. All right. So we are going to have 2 error banks in this one. This is the one we're going to return. So because there's 2 error banks, I'm giving it a special name. Otherwise, I just call it EB. But if there's multiple in play, then I name them specifically. All right. So check valid state 1. Let's see. Whatever. If both of them are blank, that's valid. It's just we don't expect there to, we wouldn't expect that to have any issues. So we'll call that records validate thing. It's going to go through and check those 2 things. We know we just set cost category to blank and follow-up question to blank. So in this case, it's simple, like on its face, though you never know. But in other cases, it may not be. All right, so all we're going to do is on EB main, assert equal, EB validate dot count errors 0. So in the context of a test, we've got this other error bank, and we're just using it. It's just weird, I suppose, for me, or I wonder if it's weird for you, to see this error bank asserting that this error bank thing is 0. But this one is just, it's because error bank is a tool that you can use. It's not inherently related to testing or validation. Before I forget, let's say set all right, let's check the next state. It's just a regular one. So we'll conclude to office supplies, and we're going to set follow-up question to blank. Even though we didn't change follow-up question, like you might say, well, look, it's already blank up there. The reason I do it is that you want each of these blocks, like in theory, if I wanted to move this down here, I should be able to move it. I should be able to move blocks around. So like I said about the test, like a moment ago, they should be a little bit longer and repetitive, just to sort of guarantee portability. This should have a one of those. This one's also going to be valid. I don't have to do anything different. I'm going to skip right over that. Check invalid state 1. Flag for context, but follow-up question is blank. Record.cost category equals cost category needs review. Record dot. All right. Can I steal this? We would expect that to throw 1 error. And let's just see. Did I do that here? Yeah. This just shows you all the errors. It just throws them all together into a string so we can see them. Seems like it should have done so. Oh, calling the wrong function. Jeez. Now I don't know about any of these things. It's okay, we're going to find out right now. Follow-up question cannot be blank for expenses classified as needs context. Okay? Everything passes. So all the checks that we have so far pass. What I want to do now is I want to make sure that the error in the validate text says whatever it said cannot be blank. I think it was that. We'll find out. ebmain.assert string contains. Error text. Let's break this out a little bit. So I'll say error text as string. Obviously, not necessarily obviously, but up here for these guys, the error text would be blank. These had no errors in them. But I know there's an error in here now, and I want to get the text. I want to see the text that the user would see, and I want to make sure that it has the message in there that I want them to see. Let's just say here. Okay, error text cannot be blank. Follow-up question cannot be blank. Good. All right. Now that you see how that works, I'll cheat for the second one. So this is non-blank, but record is tagged for review. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get rid of the message box. Everything passes. All right. Let's see what's next. Okay, so far we have we've been doing these tests. We've just been taking the first record, get first record or nothing, out of the current workbook. Let's see. Manual mode. So like this guy right here. Oh no, come back. Sorry. This should not be populated. We wrote that during a unit test, and we set the cost category to blank to make it invalid while we were. And so my concern is not so much that we damage user data, because we don't expect users to be running tests, and we can actually disable tests so that end users in like production mode cannot run tests and can only do validate. What I am concerned about is that I don't want to have to go track down data. If I empty out this workbook, I do not want to have to go import data just for the purpose of running tests. So there is a solution to that, and it's called test fixtures. What we're going to do is we're going to create a JSON, of course, and we're going to stash it in the workbook. And that JSON is going to be basically a fake import, like 5 records or whatever we need. And it's going to, in our unit test, we're gonna call a function called get expense db and then like underscore fixture loaded. And what that's gonna do is gonna wipe out any current records that exist, and then it's gonna go get that JSON and it's gonna ingest them, just like in our import script. It'll be slightly different, but it'll really be about the same. So let me just go ahead and start this. So I'm gonna create a new module called Fixtures. All right. Notes. All right. So let's just generate the module. Private function. Generate fixture string. Business expense. This one's gonna be cool too, because you'll see some Tetris, and I hope that the Tetris playing that we do helps to connect some dots. All right, so dim DB is class DB. Get DB business expense. Dim all records as collection. Right now, let's just try and get a JSON string from the records that we already have in there. We are going to need records the first time when we like create this archive. I picture it like Han Solo. He's frozen in carbonite. We're gonna freeze some records to the side, and then we have those whenever we need them. Set all records equal to db.get all records, and then we don't want to serialize all 101 of those records. When we're testing, we really just need a few of them. I'm gonna get 5, but we'll create a knob so that it's easy to change that amount. Dim subset records. Set subset records equal to slice collection. All records starting at 1. Stop index. Let's put 5 there for now. No, let's just put a constant right now. Number records. Instead of dimming a variable, if you know it's going to be the same the whole time, you use const. Instead of doing, dim num records as long, num records equals 5. We don't need to do that. It's computationally cheaper and superior to just create a constant. Put that here. So we use this slice collection. We use it over here. In the next 10 records. So when we hit this button that just like classifies the next 10 expenses, we took all the records, all the unclassified ones, and we sliced it here. And we talked about this idea that when we slice, it takes the first record up to, but does not include the last one. Half open interval. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're just going to get 5 of the records. So now we have a collection, and it's got 5 of these business expense. Arbitrary, the first 5. All right. So we want to fake as if this was like coming in from the outside world. So we're going to mirror very closely. Pardon me for bouncing around. We're going to mirror very closely this import script, where we basically create a collection. We loop through all the rows in that CSV file, and for each row, we create a little dictionary. We add that dictionary to the collection. So at the end, we have a collection of 101 dictionaries, and then we call db.ingest external records. That's sort of the greater pattern that we're following here. So at some point earlier in a video, I noted that you might be able to guess what some of those methods that just come, functions that come with your class, what they do. There is a method, and every model you create, so your fields are down here, the ones that you add through the interface, through the form. And then there's sort of this machine code that just comes automatically. And one of those is toJSON, and one of them is toDict. We're going to use the toDict one, because we don't just need this one record as a JSON. We need 5 or so. So let's say right here, print out the dictionary so you guys can see what it looks like. A couple of debug.prints like this. We'll just make some spacer lines in between. It's a good time to save. All right, let's run it. Cool. So what it did, these dictionaries, I mean, they look very, very similar to what the dictionaries that we made over here. Transact date, vendor name, description. The only difference is, no, they're identical. So now if we're faking what we did in the import, we're going to need fake web records as a new collection. It's okay to use the one-liner here. We aren't recycling it in the loop, but for this one, dim record dict is dictionary. Well, for one, we don't really need to. Never mind. Let's get rid of these pretty prints. Just add in that dictionary. So now at this point, we have a completely fake version of the current records, as if it had come from somewhere else. The last thing we need to do is just make a JSON. JSON converter dot convert to JSON fake web records. So once we have, the final object, this collection full of dictionaries, that's when we want to do the JSON. So at this point, it's like we don't need the JSON at this point. I think it would just make it harder. I know it would make it harder. You convert to the JSON at the very last moment. All right, let's print it out. Got to make it look good. Second parameter there, it's pretty indent. Yeah. Pristine records. So you can see the pretty indent. Watch, I'll set it like really high. Let's set it to like 7 and see what it does. It just like kicks it way over, see? So maybe 1 looks good. 1. Yeah, I mean, 1 looks okay to me. Okay, and this function is going to return it. All right, good spot to pause. Okay, go in dark mode now. One of the goals of these videos, I mean, the goal is not just to show you how to build a system. I'm trying to walk you through the thinking and the reasoning behind it, while also building something at the same time. So what I want to look at here is, like, if you were to analyze this function and look at it, how could you make it more general purpose? Like right now, it's for business expense, and we might have a bunch of other models. So I'm gonna look at this and see, this is how where I spend a lot of time. Let's take this old version. Let's just throw it down here for a second. And let's go up here. All right, so instead of business expense, let's say current records. And we're gonna need to get a model name, number of records is long. Okay, so we parameterize them. And then here, debug.print. I'm just kind of getting ahead of what we're gonna do. 5 records. Once we've put these parameters here, if I hit F5 on this now, it will say, it opens up this thing, because if it has actually, even if they're optional, even if the parameters are optional, it won't let you run it. You can only do the F5 thing if there's nothing there. So I have to create this little scratch, in case anybody's wondering about that. All right, so here, instead of getDB business expense, we're gonna say getDB or raise. That's all we needed. Maybe the owner. I think that one was optional, but we'll pass it. The reason is, like, when an error happens, if we pass in the caller, you see this in a few places where it asks you to pass the caller. It's so that when that error throws, ultimately, you can get some information about where the call came from. Especially with UDFs, when you have those worksheet formulas that are calling functions, sometimes it's not clear necessarily where the error is coming from. Things are really weird when the workbook first loads and the UDFs have to generate. I'll sometime talk about that more. But when they calculate for the first time, Excel's in like a very strange sort of purgatory state where it's not fully alive yet. The database isn't fully fired up, but the UDF formulas are looking. So that was actually pretty pretty excruciating to iron out. All right, so we're still going to do all records, subset. Here, I'll just bring the function that the Tetris that I did. Yeah, let's just bring it in. I always say I'm going to do things and then I don't do it. I think it's better for you to see. All right, so set record dict. Right now we have this variable record dictionary. We create it and then we immediately put it into the collection. So instead of doing that, let's just take record.toDict. Let's put that there, and then we can nuke this guy. Tetris. Tetris. Good. I didn't even remember to get rid of the variable in my other one. Get DB records by model. Okay, so there's one more Tetris move we can do. This is perfectly fine. This will work. Let's make sure. Okay, maybe it wouldn't work. But let's see, here we go. Cool, so that's right. There's one more thing we can do, and maybe this is like pushing it far, but there's so many times I was in situations where I needed to get all of the records for a model, and I would create this database for the sole purpose, create this DB variable, just so I could call get all records. And then I would march on and I would not need the DB at all again. So after doing that a number of times, I created get DB records by model, where you just pass this workbook and the model name. That is just, all that is the same thing is really what this is doing. To remind you one more time, this or raise, if you're wondering, that means that if the model name is invalid, if it doesn't exist, it's going to raise an error. The alternative to that is set db equal to get db or nothing. That would resolve to nothing. In this case, I don't want to deal with the nothing. I don't want to say if db is nothing, then, raise an error. So it's a little bit of, you just think about the situation that you're in, and there are weird situations. I don't know if you'll be in them right away, but there are situations for me certainly where the database, the model name may not exist, like on the addin side, and I don't always want to raise an error if that is the case. Sometimes I just want to give you a nice yellow intermediate warning message box instead of raising an error on you, just because of whatever the context is at that time. All right, this works. We made this better. So let's see. Okay, so recall the reason why we were building this function in the first place. And that is that we wanted this string so that we could, over here, right now on our test module for test business expense, we're assuming that there is a database in the record. There is a record in the database. We're getting the first record or nothing, and if record is nothing, all of this stuff is going to break. Nothing.cost category, that'll break right away. So we want to replace this with some sort of call to get DB business expense. It's going to be like fixture loaded, and that's going to scrub out everything that's currently in the database, and it's going to inject these 5 test records. So at the start of every test on this module, it's going to start off with a fresh database with 5 records that are always the same. And then you can change them in exactly the fashion that we have to create the conditions you need to get your tests where you want it to be. So let's just save. I'll show you how to save a fixture. So I'm just going to do it right here. Regenerate DB fixtures business expense. It's a sub. It's not going to return anything. Number of date records as long as 5. Right now, model name isn't going to change, but in the future, I don't exactly know where this is going. I don't want to hard code model name business expense. I want to set the model name here just in case. Maybe somehow we do the same thing that we did here. I'm not sure right now. So I'm actually making it a variable and not a constant as a reminder to myself that it might change in the future. All right. If we're trying to regenerate this from the current records, if there are no records, it's going to be a problem. We're saying we're going to try and get the first 5, but what if there happens to be nothing in here? Bear in mind, this is something we're going to kind of run one time as a setup, or infrequently. We'd need to run it when the fields change. If we added or removed fields, we would need to update our fixtures. So we're going to say right here, cheat a little bit. If db.recordCount equals 0, we'll go with a friendly blue information. We don't really expect an end user to ever run this procedure. It's private. It's on a private module. All right. So next, but we do, if we do run it, we do probably, in fact, I guarantee you do. If there's already fixtures on there, you may not. It's possible someone could hit F5 on this and not realize what they're doing, and you don't want to change the fixtures in that case. I think that'll make more sense in a minute. But so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this. If fixture row exists, and then we're gonna need a name. Let's pull this out right here. This workbook. You could say equals true, but the truthy falsy thing will come into play, so it's implicit. All right. We're cheating. There's some thinking that goes on in here. All right. So we're going to throw a message box here. If there's no records, we're going to inform them politely, and then we're going to close out. The next thing we're going to say is if there is a fixture row in there right now, we want to throw a warning and just say, hey, are you sure that you want to update your Han Solo records with whatever's in there now? Just to help a developer be like, no. A good example, like on reset, it's like, you definitely want to have a confirm there, because if you accidentally click that, you're going to wipe out like everything, all your expenses. Like, so it's another situation where it's good to write. And my note there about the double warning is we want to do this test first. Because if we did this test second, then we'd like ask them this thing, like, are you sure that you want to overwrite these fixtures? And then immediately after that, we'd be like, there's no records imported. So just thinking through it a little bit, it's like, you know what, let's first just shut the door on this thing and not make them see 2 message boxes. Okay? I'm down to cheat all the way down to here. All right. I wanted this nice comment. Oh, this is a line you should see. If message box message, so this is the question, has an existing fixture string, press yes to overwrite. Instead of passing VB information, VB explanation, or VB critical, that's all we've done so far. We actually want to ask the user to be like yes, no, to give us to click on one of those things. So instead of this guy, we use VB yes, no, and then you can combine that with friendly information blue. You could make it, with the exclamation one too. We're not going to do that though. Nobody likes to see the yellow red boxes. Yeah. And if they click cancel, we're not going to say like aborted or anything. This is little UX things from me. All right, let's just debug. Print it. Let's run this. Okay. No fixture row exists, so we're not going to see it. Just so you can see what that message box looked like, I don't want to fragment your attention too far. I'm going to throw a not to force it to come. Model business expense has an existing fixture setting. Press yes to override it. Okay, I can press yes or no. So the two options that it could be, let's see if the IntelliSense helps us. Watch. Equals, I'm going to hit Control Enter, no, Control Spacebar. See, it tells you. This is how you can, like, the IntelliSense will help you figure out, like, it just, you can just kind of, like, go through it. It's like a video game almost. And that, again, that's Control Space. I didn't find out about that for 6 years or something. Terrible. All right. Cool. We got the string. Good spot to pause. Changed my mind. That actually wasn't a good spot to pause. We forgot the last line. So there is a worksheet that comes with the host. Control-Shift-J. I'm opening up the sheet navigator. I'm typing in fixture. Down. Hitting enter. It's deeply hidden. Yes, I want to unhide it. There's a setting that you can change, like right here. If you set this to false, hidden worksheets won't even appear. Just in the situation where it's like, no, I do not want my end users to see that, just set that to false. Fixture registry. So this is where there's some that are in here already. And what these are is the add-in. When you're using the add-in, it's locked. So the code is locked. You can't get to it. If you go to a get DB array, Shift F2, can't display a hidden procedure. Double click here. There's a password. It'll look a little different when you're using it. It won't even ask you for a password. But the point is, when I run the unit test, when we run like validate workbook, and it's checking all those things you've seen it check, those procedures are defined in the add-in, and I can run them when the add-in is locked. But what I can't do is like go through the way I do with your workbook. I go through your workbook and find these functions. Just to be clear, I don't take any data from you except your API key and like a machine hash, which can't be used to identify you. But at runtime, the program, the add-in goes and it loops up all of these functions. It figures out, all the test functions if we're running tests or all the validate functions. And it can do that because your workbook is unlocked. If you lock your workbook, it will automatically start saving. No, it won't. We'll have to talk about that. But I'll set it up so it's the same for you. In the event that you want to, lock your workbook so your end users can't look at the code, you can still have your test, validate, reset procedures. We just cache them here on Fixture Bank. So Fixture Bank is basically a place to put data. In this case, we're gonna add some more fixtures for these fake records we're gonna use. So any fixture can go here. These are procedure names, and now we're adding records. Okay, so let's add the damn records, huh? All right, close this. Come back. All right, one more line. This JSON string, we're gonna save it right here under this fixture name. Oh, what is it? Root fixtures. This is how I remind myself. Create fixture if missing. There's a little scope pollution here, like these. These I should probably make those private. Like there's no reason why you need to see those. They're not secret, they're right there, but it's just an example of cluttering up the IntelliSense with me having too much exposure. But this one's ours, fixture name expense records right here. That's the one that we have right here. So this one we do want. And what is the default value going to be? JSON string. You can put an optional, there's one more parameter here, fixture type. We can pass in test fixture. No, let's put DB records. I don't know. The point is just for you to see where it goes. Don't hate me, but at least for some of these. That one's obvious. Let's do this one. I think I might wonder, this all makes sense. Like, yes, it's in this workbook. That's the name of the fixture and that's the string. But this, I might be like, what is that? What is that thing again? And then probably we break this up a little bit too. I have a shortcut way to do this. I wanted to do it exactly the way that you would have to do it, but I'll show you the shortcut way sometime. All right, save. Let's see if we get it. We're watching right in this area. There it is. Cool. So now we've got that JSON in there. I guess it's sort of interesting to me. It's like, it's all flat. We made it pretty. I know it works. Sometimes I wonder about things. All right, screw it. Let's just land it now. So this is going to be public function. We're finally, this is the function our test is going to call. It's going to call get DB business expense fixture loaded. It's going to return a database. Clear all existing records. Just delete all record rows. See, I don't remember what it is. I just use the IntelliSense. I seriously didn't remember if it was clear or delete. I just know it's probably one of those two. I get that you won't be able to navigate that easily, but I don't have it memorized. Maybe I should. So, you know, here we created a fixture string if it's missing. Should probably just be I don't want to like futz around too much and stray off the mission with you guys here, but I think I should look at that comment I just put there. All right, so once we get the JSON string, we're going to turn it into the fake web records, alchemy. It's just the inverse of what we were doing before. Tim Hall's converter. We're not converting to JSON this time. We are parsing the JSON back into an object. In this case, it's going to be a collection full of 5 record dictionaries. Then, let's see, do the same. db.ingest external records, web records, fake web records. Emphasizing that this, what we're doing here, these web records and this ingest and this, it's going to display a result. We'll comment that out. This is exactly the same as what was going on here, where we filled the web records. These aren't fake. These are real. I'm calling them web records. They came from a CSV, but they really truly came from the web. Yeah, it's the same thing. We're just ingesting records in the same manner. All right, cool. So let's do this. Set the name of the function equal to the return. It's going to be the database. So the test function is just going to call this. Behind the scenes, it's going to just clear out anything that's in there now and put some fake records in there and give it back to the test. Otherwise, every test function might have to go through that same pattern. Great time to save. All right, so let's go back over to our test functions now, and everywhere where we set DB here, get DB business expense, this whole module, we're just going to change it to only 2 spots. Oh yeah, move this guy up. I think that usually I would keep like the constant, sort of the testing the constants and stuff. I would group that to the top, and then I would put the kind of the opposite of how it actually is in the class modules, where I put the validation caboose. Just constants go to the top, and I feel like I'm gonna shut up now. All right, let's run it and see what happens. So currently we have 101 business expense records sitting in here. This is the one that we mutilated when we ran our test the first time. We're gonna run our test suite again. We see this import summary. That is because it's hitting our new function for the first time, get db fixture loaded, and that's the line I said we comment out. But we can see it created 5 records. It did it again. Okay, that's because twice we did that. And now there's only 5 records. So we definitely erased everything in there, but when we're unit testing, we don't really care about the data that's in there. When we're validating, we do, but not when we're unit testing. Okay, cool. Notice how, like, this is blocking. So if I was somewhere else, here, let's give a better example. Let's do it again. Note that 6.13 seconds of runtime. So let's say that you just finished coding a big block and you want to make sure you didn't break anything. You recalculate, you test workbook. You know, and in my test, when I run the full add-in test, you can do it on setting registry. There's a flag, just run add-in test, set that to true, and it'll run them in your workbook. It will only change testcat. It won't change your records. So testcat's kind of like a freebie for me. That's why I add it in there. That's why it comes with your workbook. So I can modify those cats and not worry about changing your stuff. But it's blocked right now. The test is blocked. So like you don't want anything to block a test from running or validate, but you just don't want that. 30 seconds. See? What really is less than 1 second. Never mind the annoyance of having to sit here and close it while the tests are running. Conceptually, we're not going to do this, but conceptually, let me show you something. This is the line that's causing that, the display info. If we did whoa unit tests are running, if not whoa unit tests are running, now watch. So that is only going to run because there's a flag. So when you click this test, it sets a flag. So there's a flag the whole time unit tests are running. You should not have big forks in your code that depend upon whether unit tests are running. It's like you really, in the purest sense, the production code should not change at all to accommodate a test. If the production code has to change to accommodate a test in a substantial way, that's an indication of a bad design. Call me, I'll help you. The one exception to that rule I have is like message box except testing. Whatever. Okay? That is exactly the same as this. Whoops. Didn't quite do that the way I wanted. Like that. So it just, because I feel like that's the one thing is a message box. That's the one thing that is, to me, is okay to change in the production code. All right. Should I leave this in here? Example. Suppressing unit message boxes during tests. I'm 99% sure it does it during validation too. Say 92%. All right, that's another good spot to pause. All right, let's do one more thing fast, and then we'll call it, because I don't want these videos to be as long as they have been. We're gonna do, so we tested business expense. We did validation for AI modules. We did validation for business expense. So business expense has tests and it has validation. AI only has validation. So let's just create module and let's name it test AI modules. All right. Get into copy the standard code that's on all of these. Good. All right. This one will be fast. There won't be a surprise thing where we have to go like build a fixture factory or anything like that in this. Let's get some standard code. should just have these stubs written before I start these videos. Arrange prompt equal to get db. Control space, my best friend. All right, earlier on in this video, I made a note about how in Prompt Explorer, it might be a bad idea to let the user rename the name because we're using that as an index column. That way we can get a prompt by name as opposed to having to know the ID of it. You see that here in the prompt model, there's an index column. We set that right here. We just chose it. Let's make sure that the prompt names, that's important. We should make sure they didn't change. We should make sure that the prompt names didn't change, and also that what we're really going to test is that these ones here that we've carved out are valid. Let's bring those with us. Okay. Prompt name constants as collection. New collection. Add xxx. XXX. Okay. This guy. Make a collection and put these two guys in it. All right. Why a collection? Because that's way it's easy to add more of them if we create more prompts. Dim prompt record as class prompt. That one's going to be an object. It's going to be one of these guys, hopefully. Dim prompt name as variant. Variance, it's a string, but because we're using it in a for each loop, we have to use a variant or an object for the loop variable. So the loop variable is this. For each prompt name in prompt name constants. Set prompt record equal to db dot. So this is really, I mean, honestly, you know, you could just say assert type this variable class prompt. This. Frankly, I'm leaning towards it. What did I do wrong? Oh, missed a quote. So I was going to do is kind of like the same thing down here. What was I going to do? This. Maybe this way is better. I was going to query the database for the prompt and then make sure that the names match. But you think about it, like they sort of have to. I'm leaning in favor of my new solution. I like this better. Now this guy goes away. These guys are now so close together that I just... No. Just call that DB even. Come on, guys. Let's do it. Let's make it easy. Should have a little test thingamajigger around here somewhere, don't we? Where'd that guy go? This. Whether it's test or validate, I always prefer to run it first directly before I do this. All right, save. Ran the wrong one. We expected that one though, so wherever I was. Validate, yeah. Kill me, yeah. just fix it? Let's just fix that. Tell you what though, we can't fix it because it's the test that's setting it. I think that's a sign that it's time to conclude. We're done. Thank you very much, and I hope that you guys have a good night.